Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome in to the final regular season Showdown slate, Showdown show of the season. I'm Gary Hartman, joined as always by the one and only Showdown King. Been grinding his, this is free on YouTube. We'll keep it kosher. Been grinding his behind off since, I want to say preseason, but really way before that. Cody Main. Cody, how you doing?
Yeah, obviously we have the playoffs coming up, and I'm doing good right now. But I have to say, it felt great to press submit on this final regular season Showdown article. It has been seemingly the longest season in recorded history. I'm ready to put the regular season behind us, ready to watch the rest of the games today, and then ready to sweat this one out tonight before the playoffs kick off next week.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And this isn't, any run of the mill Showdown slate to wrap up the regular season. This is a huge game, potentially for both teams, definitely for one team, where the Packers have a win and in after started opening the season 4-9 or something like that. They were really bad. And now they are winning in, obviously huge, could be winning in for the Lions, depending on what happens at 4:00 for Seattle. Obviously a division game. These two guys hate each other. These two teams hate each other to begin with. And it's a 49-point total as well, something that we have not seen a lot of on this last week 18 slate. We see a lot of low 40s, high 30s. So there's a lot to get excited about for this one, both for real life playoff purposes and of course DFS. So let's start there right off the top. Obviously Packers, I think, expected to be, are obviously favored in this one. You could see that here with macro stuff and construction projections. Anything that stands out to you there?
Yeah, the only thing that I could see this table leaning a little bit more in the direction of 3-3 is because, as we'll get to, particularly with the Detroit pass catchers, and then there's a Detroit running back in play as well, I think we might see enough value on the Detroit side that this 3-3 type build gets beefed up a little bit more in tournaments, might come closer to 40-45%. A lot of the playable Packers options are just expensive. And so for that reason, I think we might see some of these cheap Detroit options keep the balanced construction, or keep the roster construction a little bit more balanced on tonight's slate. The one thing with the motivation, like even if the Seahawks do win in the 3:00 window and Detroit is ultimately eliminated, I think Dan Campbell's crew is going to come out and play. He's got, I hate to use the phrase organizational momentum, but like this team is playing for its future, I think. So, maybe that's all wrong. Maybe that's all just garbage, narrative garbage. But even if they are eliminated from playoff contention, I do expect Detroit to come out and play this one straight up against their NFC North rivals. So hopefully no funny business. Of course, on the Green Bay side, we're going to see them going, all out to try and make the playoffs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. And Dan Campbell's too prideful of a guy to just lay down here at the end of the season for what? They're a mid-round. They're like a middle of the first round draft pick team at this point anyway. They've played too well the second half of the season. So, I agree with you. Obviously, you see the 5-1 there, not from on the Detroit side, 1-5, I should say. Not going to be very picked on. And, it's hard to go into Lambeau and expect an onslaught from the Lions where everything momentum-wise and motivation-wise is, riding, we know 100% on the Green Bay side. You can get unique otherwise, but you're going to see a pretty nice spread there between 3-3s and 4-2s for Green Bay. And then, the 5-1 might be a little underplayed there for the Green Bay onslaught as well.
And one final point that I'll make on the roster construction stuff, as I alluded to, with all the value on the Detroit side, I think the 4-2s, the 3-3s is going to be like, hey, I'm going to pay up for my Packers and then let me get the value to make this stuff work with the Detroit guys. I think one way to play within the popular roster construction tonight, if you want to go 4-2, maybe you find a little bit of value on the Packers side and then pay up for your expensive options on the Detroit side. That could be, ARSB. It could be, DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, and then kind of just flip the build that way within the more popular construction.
Yep. Makes sense. All right. So let's start at quarterback as we always do. Obviously, the reigning back-to-back MVP winner in Aaron Rodgers, that will be coming to an end over the next couple of weeks, but, definitely picked up his play in the second half of the season. And I still don't think we're seeing the best Aaron Rodgers football, but he's definitely done enough here with, some of his worst receiving cores that he's had in his career to, get this team in this position where they're winning in tonight. Obviously gets a really good matchup here. The Lions have definitely been solid against the run in the second half of the season, but they remain pretty easy to throw against. They're at home. We have a 10-4 Aaron Rodgers with 73% total ownership. Only 12% captain seems reasonable to me. How are you approaching Aaron Rodgers here tonight.
Yeah, let me get the cash game discussion out of the way, because I do think it is Aaron Rodgers in cash. He's not only a must. I think we should be locking Aaron Rodgers in cash. Anyone not playing him in those type of contests is making a mistake tonight. I think we need to just get that out of the way. And I'll say the same for Jared Goff. And maybe we can get some pushback on the Jared Goff discussion. But when we get to the Detroit pass catchers, they're trotting out a 3-man rotation at tight end, a 3-man rotation for the wide receiver 3 spot. You have DeAndre Swift, you have Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Shark. Like, there's so many options in the pass game that it's possible a couple of them outright fail, but Jared Goff picks up the production by spreading the ball around to 4, 5, 6, 7 of those options. So for me in cash games, it is both quarterbacks, as it often is. I think maybe you can push back a little bit on the Goff stuff before we move on to the skill positions tonight. But I think that both of these guys are cash game musts. And you brought up the interesting point with these ownership projections. Aaron Rodgers, 12.1% captain, seems awfully light for the slate's best projected play. He's only 10-4. He's got the highest ceiling projection on the slate, but as we often see, and I think this has become kind of a crutch for a majority of the Showdown field, the skill position players are much sexier than a pocket passing Aaron Rodgers. And these are the perfect spots to pick on a 12.1% owned captain, because of all of the options that Aaron Rodgers can spread the ball around to. We have Christian Watson presumably healthy. Allen Lazard is still there. Randall Cobb and Romeo Doubs will be mixing it in. We even have Robert Tonyan, Big Bob Tonyan. We have Mercedes Lewis. We have Josiah DeGuara. I like these spots where it is feasible to see Aaron Rodgers spread the ball around, throw 3 touchdown passes to 3 different receivers, and he beats all of his pass catchers as the optimal captain. I think that's a really interesting way to start tournament roster construction, because a Captain Rodgers team is probably going to get you on to 2 relatively low-ish owned Packers wide receivers. And we'll talk about those guys in a second here. But I think that's a start to what would seem like a relatively popular roster construction, but I think it's going to be a little bit more unique tonight than it should be.
I agree with everything you just said. If you recall, once upon a time on one of these Showdown slates much earlier in the season, I flag planted Aaron Rodgers when he was coming in light. And the reason for that, obviously he had been struggling. The Packers have been struggling, but we forget that these pocket older passers that are just so, mechanical and so precise and can just come out for a 300-yard 4-touchdown game at any point. We saw it with Tom Brady last week after not doing it all season. So there's no reason to think that in the most important game in a great matchup, he can't do it here. And on the Goff stuff, I agree with you. In cash, I would be wanting Goff in cash. I think Goff is fine here. Obviously, we don't love Goff as much away from Ford Field in the cold weather. There's reasons to be off Goff, but I think game script alone should be in Goff's favor. He will throw the ball a ton tonight. And I expect, a solid floor out of Jared Goff here. So,
and I think that's the biggest thing. Solid floor from Goff. I think where you might get paid off with an ownership discount in tournaments, he does make some sense. I really have a tough time going there at captain, where the ownership is just a little bit too high for me if it comes in around 7%. But I think you can certainly make a case, in particularly as we get to these pass catchers on the Detroit side, if you're rostering multiple of them anywhere in the lineup, whether it be captain or flex, I think pairing them with Goff makes sense. And then, if you have someone like Amon-Ra or Shark at a captain, I would probably want Jared Goff in those lineups.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. All right, let's go over to running back here. Bunch of interesting names, 4 to be exact, 2 on each side that have plenty of viability here. I think let's start on the Lions side, because I think it's a little bit more of an interesting conversation, because we talked about motivation. We haven't talked too much about incentive stuff yet. And Jamal Williams is one of those guys tonight with a lot of incentive. He's got the Lions rushing record in sight. He's got the league leading rushing touchdown record to hold on to. He's got, I believe, contract incentive stuff as well. So, and we know this coaching staff loves the guy and trusts him in pretty much any package. So, lots of reasons to talk yourselves into Jamal Williams tonight.
I've been doing my best in week 17 and week 18 with prop betting, with building DFS lineups, not to get too bogged down in the contract stuff. And shout out to Amico. He did a really good contract incentive and milestone article for us that's up on the site that I suggest you guys check out before building lineups for tonight's slate, because there are a few things in there, as you alluded to, with Jamal Williams, incentives and contract stuff. And I think that's one thing. This team would prefer to ride Jamal Williams for as long as the game remains close, and this is a premier matchup for them to do so. This is a run-inviting Packers defense that, when they do invite the run, they can't seem to stop opposing running backs from ripping off big gains. They rank near the bottom of the league in explosive run rate, near the bottom of the league in rushing yards, rush EPA per play, rushing yards allowed per game. This seems like a great spot for Jamal Williams. It's just tough to get a big projection on him at 7K when he is a 2-down back. You're not going to get a lot of pass game work from Jamal Williams in as a 4.5 point, 5-point dog. It's going to be tough to get a huge projection. I was kind of hopeful that this ownership projection would come down a little bit. 27.9% is okay. If you want to play into the matchup narrative and some of the incentive related stuff, I think this could be a spot where even if he doesn't add a lot through the air, you get one of those 2 touchdowns, both of them, of course, coming from the 1-yard line, and Jamal Williams ending up in an optimal lineup.
Yeah, we've seen that so many times this year, the 2 touchdown Jamal Williams games, almost James Conner 2021-esque, where
Right.
Everything else doesn't necessarily go, the way you project it, but he falls into the end zone 2 or 3 times and he's breaking slates that way. All right. DeAndre Swift, we've seen be more involved in recent weeks. He's been a roller coaster of usage this year. Get weird comments out of the coaches every week about wanting less work, more work. He's involved in the passing game. We know he's the better player and he's super explosive and he's projecting better in this spot, or at least, base projection better, ceiling projection similar. And I guess that's due to Jamal Williams' touchdown upside. But similar ownership both in base and captain projections. Any Swift takes here tonight?
It's tough because, like you said, there's just so many different ways that it could go, and it really comes down to ownership for me. This is a guy that I don't want to play when he's going to be owned, and I do want to try and be on to catch those lightning in a bottle type games from him when he's completely unowned. 29.1% as we have it projected now seems relatively efficient.
Yeah.
Again, like Jamal, I was kind of hoping it would come in a little bit lower than that so I could talk myself into playing some DeAndre Swift, but I think the fact that his base projection is elevated. He's only $600 more than Jamal Williams. I think there's kind of a floor there on that ownership. I don't see the bottom falling out nearly as often as I do for somebody like Jamal Williams, who could potentially come in 20 to 25% or even lower, which I would prefer. The fact that they have the same ceiling projection, Jamal Williams is a little bit lower owned and he's $600 cheaper, kind of has me leaning towards Jamal Williams if I'm playing one of these backs in tournaments and just hoping that I can catch that incentive narrative, catch the matchup related upside and get one of those performances from him.
Yeah, I agree with you there, actually. All right, Packers side of things. Aaron Jones has been battling some health stuff of late. I think he's fully good to go here tonight, but you obviously got Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. We've already mentioned the Packers should be playing all out. I think we all agree Aaron Jones is the more complete back, the more higher upside back, but he's also more expensive and coming through with a lot more ownership. And he takes on the Packers backfield tonight.
Yeah, this one's tough because from like a pure on paper spot perspective, this seems like an absolute eruption spot for somebody like Aaron Jones. I am just slightly worried about the ownership, particularly where we see 16.5% captain ownership. I think he should be less owned than Aaron Rodgers, but I just don't think the field will do that. So he does have a lead in the backfield opportunity rate, target rate, and this Lions rush defense has been better, but still 26th in explosive rush rate allowed, 28th in rush EPA per play, 27th in Football Outsiders run defense DVOA. I think as a 4.5 point, a 5-point home favorite in a must-win spot, this coaching staff would prefer to lean on Aaron Jones, assuming full health. I think he's a cash game must alongside Aaron Rodgers, where he's going to get there regardless of game script. Even if they do fall behind, he's going to get those pass down opportunities. And, I think Jones is an awesome play. You can make a bear case just in the event that it's somebody like A.J. Dillon or through the air that they find their touchdowns at 16.5% captain ownership. I'm probably going to end up coming in underweight that.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that at all. But total ownership, I don't mind, where it's, a lot of times I talk about how I kind of want to gain leverage by going over on captain. In this spot, if I ended up around the field or over the field, even in my flex ownership on Aaron Jones, I wouldn't feel upset about it. I just think he's got the nicest floor ceiling combo probably of all your skill guys, maybe except Amon-Ra. Let's transition over to wide receiver, tight end right now. We'll do team by team. I have Green Bay up here, so we'll talk about them. First, obviously, a lot of different names. You kind of insinuated it before, right? Cobb's back. Christian Watson's healthy. Romeo Doubs came back a couple of weeks ago. Lazard's out there running the majority of routes. So a lot of names here. Then, not even mentioning Tunyon. That's why, you mentioned Rodgers, liking him as a captain and kind of picking, and messing around with your combinations of who you double or potentially even triple him with. Any wide receiver takes, because for me, it's kind of, I want to play some ownership games here, but I have a hard time differentiating my favorite guys.
Yeah, exactly. Play the ownership games. If you're building a 20 max set, if you're hand building 10 lineups, if you're somebody that MME's a 150 portfolio, you can get 24, you can get 2x the field on Aaron Rodgers with 24% captain ownership, and then kind of mix and match those combos throughout that 24% of your Captain Rodgers lineups. We might as well head to the elephant in the room here between Christian Watson and Alan Lazard. Alan Lazard has a 0.4%, a 0.4 higher DraftKings base projection, zero point 0.4 lower ceiling projection than Christian Watson, but is $1,600 cheaper and is 10% less owned. I mean, if you guys have been following along at all this season, you know where I'm going first and foremost. You're telling me that I'm going to get paid off with a price discount, an ownership discount, and I can roster the guy who has nearly the exact same ceiling. It's Alan Lazard for me if I have to choose any one of these guys. And look, I know Christian Watson is a better NFL receiver than Alan Lazard at this point of their respective careers. Christian Watson probably comes out healthy after logging limited practices this week, and he's probably coming out with a vengeance. And everyone wants to roster this guy. Everyone's loved this guy in the fantasy football community since the offseason. That has not stopped since he burst onto the scene right around week 10. I think that 45 to 50% Christian Watson is going to leave me with 30 to 35% owned Alan Lazard. And, for me, that's a slam dunk. I just hope we don't see one of those 3 touchdown Christian Watson performances like we have too frequently this season.
Yeah, I do agree with you, actually. Lazard is one of those guys that's like a very good NFL receiver, I think, and pops for fantasy only once or twice a year.
Yeah.
But, is out there so much on the field of Aaron Rodgers. Good matchup. I'll play the ownership side there. Any love for Tunyon or, the punts at Mercedes Lewis, who we've seen, once or twice this year have a touchdown?
Yeah, it is tough. These are the guys that if you're playing the largest field tournaments on DraftKings, you need to include. And I wrote about in the article, like Tunyon, the opportunities aren't there. They're low ADOT opportunities. He's kind of a catch and fall down type of guy right now at this point of his career and at this point of the season. So you are hoping that he just falls into the end zone. And at 5K, he's probably going to have to do more than just fall into the end zone once. He's probably going to have to rack up a few receptions on top of that as well. So for me, I'm getting my Tunyon exposure in my Aaron Rodgers doubles or my Aaron Rodgers triples. I think Mercedes Lewis, though he has a less than 1 DraftKings point projection, this is a good matchup for tight ends that line up in line as Mercedes Lewis does. I think you could see him go 2 receptions, a touchdown, and like 12 yards, and that would be plenty. That's $400 off the stone minimum. Same thing for Josiah DeGuara. It would be a max 1 rule, of course, for those guys. And then Randall Cobb. This is a really good matchup for slot receivers as well. I know Romeo Doubs is going to mix in some, but I think mostly that will come on the perimeter. I still think that in 3 wide receiver sets, it will likely be Christian Watson, Alan Lazard on the outside, Randall Cobb manning the slot. It's been a good matchup for opposing slot receivers against the Lions. So yeah, I mean, not to give a cop-out answer, but I like Captain Aaron Rodgers tonight. I'm going to be mixing in a lot of these guys. The only thing that I can say definitively is I will be underweight 45, 50% on Christian Watson, and that could set up a night of maximum pain, but I'm just kind of hoping that the opportunities flow elsewhere from Rodgers.
All right. Makes sense to me. All right. Lion side, as I mentioned, game script to me should work in the favor of all of these guys. Amon-Ra is obviously the place to start here. Has definitely been, one of the guys that we really hit on here at ETR, and a lot of people around the fantasy community throughout the season paid off his 4th round or whatever tag he was going on early season. And I think, you see that reflected in his 11K salary. He's got a great floor ceiling combo. He's the very clear number 1, 2, and 3 target over there in Detroit. So how are you handling some of the Sun God tonight?
Yeah, huge floor ceiling combo, huge price tag. And when I initially pulled up the slate, as I often say I do, I look at the slate, I kind of think of how things break down before I ever write a thing up, before I ever do an ownership projection. And I was kind of thinking that 11K price tag might suppress his total ownership and captain ownership a little bit. Just turns out we don't really need the money on this slate. So I don't think we're going to get any sort of pay up to be contrarian ownership discount on Amon-Ra. That doesn't really scare me away. This, unlike, we talked about with Aaron Jones, where we might be okay getting around the field in his total ownership. For me, if I'm playing a side of the Amon-Ra and you have to take a stand, it would be getting overweight on that captain and probably coming in around the field or even under at his total ownership projection. I think if we get an Amon-Ra game that is, something we need, that is a slate winning type of performance, it probably comes at captain. We've seen those huge 30 to 40 point type eruptions from him this season, and He's a huge target earner, has double-digit targets in 8 of 15 games. If I want to play a side and I do want exposure to Amon-Ra tonight, it's going to be that stance for me is just going to be coming in overweight at captain and probably under, to be honest, as much as I'm trying to spread out my exposure to these Packer guys, probably coming in a little bit under on his total ownership.
I completely agree with you. And, a question that we get quite often is like, if you're doing a 2-4 or a 4-2 in favor of the Packers or even a 5-1, can that captain be somebody from the opposing team? Amon-Ra is the perfect example of that, right? You could do 4 Packers, 2 Lions, and Amon-Ra playing game script, playing catch up is like the ultimate spot for him. So
exactly.
Yeah,
yep.
Totally agree there.
In a spot where you could pair him up in a 4-2 where you've got 4 Packers and you could pair him up with Goff if you wanted to, though the PPR skill set, you really don't have to. But if you did that, you're immediately flipping the build on those very popular 4-2 rosters because you just don't have the money to pay up for some of these other expensive Packers options who will be very popular. So I like that from a construction perspective. That's really going to flip the build, and you're going to get a lot of high projected players in those lineups, but it won't be owned.
It's actually the way I like to play Showdown quite a bit. When there's like this super high skilled position player on the underdog team in a high total, it's the way I like to play it. So for the lineups that I'll be making tonight, a lot of it will be Amon-Ra captain with more Packers in the total lineup, or 3-3s, 4-2s, something like that.
I like that quite a bit, and I wrote about it in the article. Like, I'm a sucker for these types like Amon-Ra, who can get there when their offense is efficient because he's just an alpha, but they can also get there when they're getting smacked because he's just going to catch up. He's going to get all that PPR volume.
Yep, agreed for sure. All right. Before we talk tight ends here, because I think that's an interesting conversation. All these other guys. Chark is definitely the most interesting name since he's come back from injury. He's had a pretty consistent role. Still, I didn't get the chance to read through all the stats you had there, but I'd imagine his ADOT's been pretty solid as well. And just a guy that, we know is a deep play threat. So before we talk about everyone else, I think he's the clear number 2 option, and salary would say that as well.
Yeah, totally agree on Chark. At 18% projected ownership, I think he's a play. I would want to come in over that in tournaments. Certainly not somebody that we can trust in cash game contests, but as you alluded to, 28.1% air yard share. He has a team high 15 targets this season that have come at least 20 yards downfield. Obviously, with Jair Alexander on the outside, they're giving up explosive pass plays at just a 7.9% clip is Green Bay's defense, so it's not exactly the optimal spot to pick on somebody like Chark. But if you're telling me 15 to 20% ownership on a guy who does have that type of big play upside, I think Chark should be owned in tournaments.
Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. All right. Before again, tight ends, I think an interesting conversation, but Jameson Williams, obviously the rookie that has had one big play so far, but has been eased in very slowly to come along here. Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds. That's a max 1 spot for me of those 3, especially Reynolds and Khalif. I think Jameson's got that big play upside that you can make an argument if you wanted to mix and match. But I think all those guys belong in pools. We've seen success out of all 3 of them at varying times this year.
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it. Just a max 1 spot for me. The fact that Jameson Williams is 2,400 kind of makes it tough because we know he's not going to be out there too often, maybe 15, 20, 25% of the team's routes. He could certainly be the type of guy that busts one big play as we have seen.
Yeah.
But it's tough for me to go there over the more projectable volume from guys like Khalif Raymond and Josh Reynolds. Of that trio, Josh Reynolds is probably my favorite. Certainly going to be the most owned of that group because he's the cheapest and has the highest base projection. But I think you nailed it with just a max 1 spot. These are guys that we should be mixing in in our 4-2s. If we do have Goff in a lineup, these are guys that make sense as well.
Yep. All right, the tight end thing, I find this spot fascinating because since they've traded away Hawkinson, it's really been like a 3-headed monster where you can make a case for any of them in like an ugly case. I don't think any of these guys are particularly good. We saw Mitchell that first week. Hawkinson was out finding the end zone. Zylstra's been the guy that's had the nose for the end zone, I think more consistently, but Brock Wright's the guy with the biggest role. So obviously it's a max 1. I mean, Zylstra, I guess, would be the guy because he's only 1,000 that we've seen consistent end zone targets and some end zone success there that I would talk myself into the most, but it's a spot that I wish there was a 2-headed monster instead of a 3, but
I agree. It's tough, and the fact that Brock Wright is 3K makes it even tougher to trust somebody like him over,
Right.
Jamison Williams or Khalif Raymond. I think you could probably extend that max one rule from Jamison Williams, Khalif Raymond, and Josh
Yeah, to the
Reynolds. You
tight
could
ends.
probably
Yeah.
extend that all the way to Brock Wright, Shane Zylstra, and James Mitchell, and just do that 6-man group of guys who are going to be rotating and have direct competition for targets, direct competition for playing time. You probably just max one that entire group of 6 players. That might limit some roster constructions that you can do. So maybe you need to play around with that a little bit. But I have a tough time seeing like 2 of that, even that group of 6 get there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that's right. Okay. Defense, kicker stuff. Obviously, we mentioned the 49-point game total high for this week. Kickers, I think, would expect to be involved there. Defense wise, obviously, you're seeing a good projection and solid ownership, or solid projection, solid ownership on Green Bay at home here. Lions, $400 more. Tough to get there with a 3.9 base projection. Not even a full 3.9, just a 3.9. So I guess how you're approaching the defenses and kickers here.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could go full GPP bro here. Maybe you can. I have a really tough time getting there. Even $3,400 Lions defense, who's going to be 8.1% owned as we have projected there, just really tough for me to get there. I will say the Packers only being 20.2% projected is surprising for me, and I think a lot of that probably just comes down to the game total. 40 being 49, people being infatuated with this Lions offense and options from this Lions offense, I think will keep that Packers DST ownership suppressed. Love it in 5-1s. If you could give me like a Rodgers double with Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon in the Packers DST and a 5-1, that makes it move a little bit. And I think the fact that we have all of those cheap options that we just discussed on the Lions side, although individually they're really tough to get too excited about, I think that group as a whole is going to soak up a lot of the cheap value ownership. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I feel pretty good about that 20.2% projected ownership on the Packers DST. I will probably come in over that because these are the type of game environments that I really like to attack DST when we think the opposing quarterback is going to be dropping back a ton. Love Jared Goff, but it is still Jared Goff at the frozen tundra. I think mistakes are bound to happen, and I think we can capitalize on that.
Yeah, road, cold weather, high pressure, Jared Goff against a really hot team. I would agree with you on the 20%.
It looked like the Packers defense doesn't even need to prevent scoring. Like that, scoring's fine by us. If we get a back and forth shootout and we get a potential pick 6 type situation,
right,
that's
exactly.
I mean, it all scores the same way.
Yeah, another question that we get asked a lot, right? Like, how often should we be including defenses in onslaughts, right? Like if I'm doing 5-1 Packers, I want the Packers defense in most of that. I'm assuming that a pick 6 is in there at some point.
Historically, that happens so often. Like the top 1% rate, or the rate at which defenses are owned in top 1% finishing 5-1 lineups would shock most people. It's like 60% plus dating back to 2020. And one way you can make sure that happens, the solver is a great way to do it. If you have access to the solver optimizer, you can set a rule that any 5-1 Packers onslaught, you can boost the Packers DST by 25%, by 30%, whatever you need to get a majority of those Packers DSTs in those 5-1 lineups.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, kicker wise, actually weather is seeming okay. 24 miles per hour, not that cold for January. Not only 9 mile per hour winds, according to NFLweather.com, the old trusty site there. So I think that's fine for these kickers. Obviously, similar thing. I'm probably more interested in Green Bay if I'm attacking it from that way, but you can make an argument that Jared Goff will be stalled out a little bit there on the third. He's in them still able to move the ball. So I like both these guys. I have no problem coming in around the field on either of them. So.
Yeah, I agree. And I think both are cash game options. We just talked about all those really cheap skill position players that probably project better from a pure point per dollar perspective, but have so many warts within their respective outlooks that it's tough to get excited for any one of them in cash game contests. So for me, probably going to end up playing both of these kickers in cash games just for the pure safety of it.
All right. Very good. I know most of you guys are watching football right now. We have to get out of here anyway. So questions wise, feel free to in Discord tag one of us. We'll do our best to respond if you're a subscriber. If not, please do smash that bell and give us a thumbs up for the free content we've been giving you all season when we can. And, we'll be back for some in the playoffs here for Showdown slates, I'm sure. But before we get out of here, Cody, obviously, as our last regular season Showdown show of the season, must give you the honors for the flag plant, my friend.
I appreciate it. It's been a fantastic regular season, worth of Showdown slates, worth of Showdown flag plants. We're going down swinging tonight, and by swinging, I mean we're going against Christian Watson, one of the fantasy football community's favorite young wide receivers, a budding star by all accounts. He's $1,600 more expensive than teammate Allen Lazard, but has a lower base projection, and Allen Lazard is going to be lower owned. So while everyone is cheering on this star rookie, Christian Watson, I will be rooting for, who I don't even know if is a good NFL wide receiver. He might be, but is certainly not a great fantasy football wide receiver. I think we can still get there in a 1-game sample. Give me Allen Lazard in the optimal lineup tonight.
Yeah, I think I finally know exactly how your flag plant mine works. I could have told you were going there.
Yeah. I think most people by week 18 have me pegged where I'm going.
Yeah. I think I have some tells, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more of a wild card here. And I'm going to go out swinging, like really swinging here on our last week.
I love it.
And I'm going to go with a guy that was riding our bench the entire FFPC main event season. We never dropped him because we thought maybe, hey, one time at the end of the year. We saw one huge bomb out of him in his second game back here. Was a top 10 pick for a reason. A lot of people's top overall receiver in this past draft. I'm going to go Jameson Williams. I think they throw everything against the wall here. They want to win this game regardless. I think the Rams may play spoiler for Seattle today, so maybe Detroit's really playing this game. And even so, I know it's only been around 25% snaps or so. I think that increases a little bit tonight. And even if it doesn't for Jameson Williams, I think he gets 2 or 3 targets downfield, and you just need one of those to connect. No one's going to play him. I really like him a lot. You can play him with Amon-Ra too. I think it's fine, even in 4-2 stuff or something like that. So I like Jameson Williams as a real MME GPP play tonight. I think 10% or so in your flex would be a solid decision here for you tonight.
So. I love that spot. The price tag is cheap enough that if he does just come down with one of those receptions, you're going to be doing backflips. And as you alluded to, the routes have come up 15% in week 14, 16 in week 15, 18 in week 16, all the way up to 31% last week, route participation in week 17. They're going to go out there, like you said, they're going to go down swinging regardless of the outcome of this Rams Seahawks game. But if they're in contention, I think Jameson Williams does give them the best chance of those, wide receiver 3 options to come out victorious. And I would love to see it for Jameson Williams.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Right. So 31, that's great. Maybe we get into the 40s tonight as far as route participation is concerned. So I like those 2 flags for us. Go out there, Lazard, Jameson Williams, play around Roger stuff. I think he's in a good spot here as well, and enjoy the last Showdown slate of the regular season. As I mentioned, we don't know our exact Showdown schedule for the playoffs or not yet, but we'll be in touch. If you're behind the paywall, you'll be obviously we'll have the Showdown articles. Is that right, Cody? As well as projections for the main one-off slates.
Yep, primetime Showdown slates. Generally, the way that we've done it for Established Run throughout the postseason is we will have the projection table that you see there with projections and ownership for any slate greater than 50K for top prizes on the flagship GPP, and then anything over 200K or more generally gets the full breakdown. So we'll try and keep that same format going throughout the playoffs. We will communicate any updates to subscribers with the rest of our content schedule for the Showdown stuff.
Beautiful. So you will see our faces again. Good luck to you guys all and ladies all tonight, and hope you're enjoying the last Sunday of the regular season. We'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.